The room was quiet, almost too quiet. A few people whispered, glanced at each other, and then looked back at the small piano in the corner. It was an ordinary day, with ordinary people gathered in an ordinary hall. No one expected anything extraordinary to happen. The woman who approached the piano was quiet herself, carrying nothing but a small notebook and a calm presence. She had been invited to play, but for most, it was just a formality. They assumed it would be a simple tune, a background sound while they chatted and sipped their drinks. She sat down, straightened her posture, and looked at the keys. Her fingers hovered above them for a moment, as if greeting old friends. The audience hardly noticed. Conversations continued, chairs shuffled, and a few people took the time to scroll through their phones. There was no excitement in the room, no anticipation. Most had low expectations, and she knew it. It did not bother her. She was not there to impress anyone. She was there to play, and that was enough. A deep breath, and her hands began to move. The first notes were soft, almost shy. It sounded familiar, simple, like a melody anyone could imagine. A few heads turned briefly, then went back to their previous activities. This was exactly what most people expected, but she was listening to herself. She was not playing for the audience yet. She was feeling the music in her own way. Each note carried a thought, a memory, a tiny emotion that no one else could hear. It was private, personal, and yet it was about to become something shared. As she continued, her posture changed slightly. Her back straightened, her shoulders relaxed, and her hands moved with more certainty. The melody, still simple, started to bend and shift. Small changes, almost invisible, began to emerge. The audience, still distracted, did not notice, but a few people glanced up, sensing something different. It was subtle, almost unrecognizable. The first notes were a test, a gentle introduction, a way to see if the room would listen. One elderly man in the corner stopped a mid-sip of his coffee. Something about the tune caught his attention. It was not flashy, not fast, not overwhelming. It was gentle, precise, and careful. He tilted his head, trying to understand it. A young woman nearby put her phone down and listened more closely. The pianist's hands moved gracefully, but there was more than grace, there was a story. The story was not obvious yet, but it was there, quietly unfolding. The pianist closed her eyes briefly. Memories came to her in waves, like soft ripples on a calm lake. She remembered learning the piano as a child, the countless hours of practice. The moments when her fingers would fumble and she would start over again. She remembered the joy of discovering a chord that sounded just right, the thrill of hearing a melody that made her heart beat faster. All of that experience, all of that feeling, was flowing through her fingers now. Even if no one could see it, a young boy at the back of the room pressed his face against the edge of the table. He did not understand much about music, but he could feel something strange. His little heart responded to the sound even though he could not explain why. The melody was soft, and it seemed to speak to him in a language he had never heard before. He leaned closer, curiosity overcoming his shyness. The pianist continued, letting her emotions guide her fingers. She was not rushing. She did not need to. Every note mattered, and she gave each one the attention it deserved. There was patience in her movements, patience in her mind, patience in her heart. She was building something quietly, something that would not be recognized immediately, but would grow slowly, like a seed taking root in the soil. A man near the piano shifted in his chair. He had come with friends, expecting a polite performance, background noise for their evening. Yet something about the melody caught him off guard. It was not loud or dramatic, but there was a depth to it, a weight he could feel. He looked around, noticing that others were beginning to pay attention as well. Small gestures, subtle glances, began to spread through the room. People who had been talking quietly were now turning their heads, drawn by the music even before they understood why. The pianist did not rush. She allowed the room to adjust, to find the rhythm of her playing. The simple melody was slowly becoming more than simple. There were moments of pause, moments of hesitation, moments where she let a single note linger just a fraction longer than expected. Each pause carried meaning. Each hesitation told a story. Each lingering note invited the listener to lean in, to feel, to imagine, to remember. A woman near the back wiped a tear from her eye. She did not know why she was crying. The music had not been dramatic, had not been loud or fast or complicated, yet it touched something inside her. A memory, a feeling, a dream long forgotten, seemed to stir. She glanced around, half embarrassed, realizing that others were experiencing something similar. There were small nods, small expressions of recognition, small smiles that came from understanding something wordless. The pianist opened her eyes briefly, glanced at the audience, and returned to the keys. She was aware of them, but she did not play for them. She played for the music, and through the music for herself. And somehow, the music began to reach others. She could feel it even without seeing it fully. The energy in the room was changing. The simple expectations of a quiet background melody were starting to dissolve, placed by something heavier, something alive. The notes grew more deliberate. Each movement of her hand had intention. The melody was no longer just a string of simple sounds, it was becoming a conversation. Her music spoke of small joys and quiet sorrows, of moments that often go unnoticed, but matter deeply. The audience, previously indifferent, was beginning to listen, to lean forward, to be present in a way they had not been before. A teenage girl in the front row leaned on her elbow, lost in thought. She had heard many piano pieces before, but none that felt like this. It was not about skill or speed, but about honesty. Each note seemed to say something true, something personal, something she could feel in her chest. She closed her eyes, letting the music fill her completely. Meanwhile, the pianist's hands continued to move. The room had grown still, almost reverently quiet. Even the whispers had faded. Chairs were no longer being shuffled. Phones were quietly put down. People were listening now, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. They did not know exactly what they were waiting for. They only knew that something important was happening. The melody, still gentle, began to hint at complexity. Slight changes, small variations, subtle shifts in timing and rhythm were emerging. They were so quiet that only the most attentive could notice. The music was alive, breathing, growing. It carried a sense of anticipation without rushing, a promise that something more beautiful was about to come. The audience felt it instinctively, even if they could not articulate it. The pianist paused for just a moment, letting a single note hang in the air. It was long, it was steady, it was full. The silence after the note was almost as important as the note itself. In that pause, people felt the weight of the music, the gravity of the moment. Their hearts seemed to sync with the rhythm of her playing. Even those who had arrived with no expectation were now caught, fully present, fully engaged. She smiled faintly, almost to herself, as she began again. The simple melody continued, but there was now a sense of purpose. It was no longer just background music. It was a story, a journey, an experience that was only just beginning. The audience was not aware yet of the magic that was about to unfold, but the first seeds had been planted. The quiet, unassuming start had done its work. The room had shifted, and something rare and beautiful was beginning to grow. The first notes had done their work. The room had settled, and people were now listening, some with curiosity, others with quiet admiration. The pianist's fingers moved confidently, and the melody began to take shape. It was no longer just a simple tune. It was alive, stretching and bending in ways that made the music feel personal. Every note seemed to carry emotion, as if each key pressed had a story behind it. The audience could feel it, even if they did not know exactly why. The young boy at the back had straightened up. His eyes were wide with wonder. He could not name what he was feeling, but his small heart was beating faster. Something about the music felt important, like a secret being whispered just to him. He leaned closer, trying to see the pianist's hands. Fascinated by the movement, by the way the notes seemed to float in the air. The elderly man, who had been sipping coffee earlier, now sat forward. He listened with intensity, every wrinkle in his face seeming to soften with each passing note. Memories stirred in his mind of times long gone, of songs his mother had played on a similar piano, of afternoons spent in quiet rooms filled with music. A tear fell from his eye, though he did not wipe it away. He simply let it be, knowing that music had reached him in a way words never could. The pianist's eyes were half closed now, her focus entirely on the keys. She was not performing for applause or recognition. She was performing because the music demanded it, because her soul needed it. Each note had intention. Each pause had meaning. She felt the weight of the room, the growing attention, and let it inspire her without distracting her. The audience could feel her sincerity, her honesty, her connection to the music. A young woman near the front rested her chin on her hand, mesmerized. She had come expecting a simple performance, something pleasant in the background. And instead, she found herself captivated. The music seemed to speak directly to her emotions. She felt joy, but also a quiet sadness. She thought of moments she had forgotten, of dreams she had left behind, and of hopes she still held close. Each note seemed to weave her memories into the melody, making the experience intensely personal. The melody began to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly. There were moments of lightness, delicate touches that danced across the keys. Then came depth and resonance, chords that echoed in the chest, vibrations that could be felt as much as heard. It was as if the piano itself had become alive, breathing along with her, responding to her feelings. The audience felt this change too, though they could not explain it. The music was no longer just sound. It had become experience, connection, emotion. A man near the side of the room, who had been skeptical at first, now leaned back in his chair, silent and attentive. He had heard many piano performances in his life, but few that affected him so profoundly. The simplicity of the opening had lulled him into thinking it would remain ordinary. But he was now caught in the current of the performance, unable to turn away. The melody was guiding him, carrying him along with it, and he surrendered to it willingly. The pianist allowed her hands to wander slightly, exploring variations within the melody. Each movement was deliberate, each chord chosen with care. The audience could sense the thought behind every note. There was no rush, no haste, only intention and precision. And yet the music did not feel mechanical. It felt alive, breathing, human. It reached people in ways that words could not, bypassing intellect and speaking directly to the heart. The young boy at the back closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. He felt a strange combination of excitement and peace, as if the music was unlocking something deep within him. He imagined stories in his mind, scenes of hope and wonder, all inspired by the simple, yet powerful movements of her fingers. The music had transported him to a place beyond the room, a place where imagination and emotion were free to roam. The elderly man quietly wiped his tears, smiling faintly. He realized he had been holding his breath without knowing it. The music had captured his attention fully, reminding him of life's fleeting beauty and the importance of savoring each moment. He thought about the people he had loved, the lessons he had learned, and the dreams he had chased. All of it seemed connected to the melody in some unspoken way. The piano had become a mirror to his own soul. The young woman in the front now leaned forward, completely absorbed. She felt a connection not just to the music, but to the performer herself. The sincerity and dedication in her playing made the experience feel intimate, as though she were being invited into a private world. She could almost sense the stories behind each chord, the memories that shaped each note. It was a reminder that talent was not just about skill, but about heart, about living through the music, about giving a piece of oneself to the audience. The pianist's hands moved more confidently now, the music evolving naturally. There were moments of gentle playfulness, small twists in the melody that brought smiles to some faces. Then came moments of deep intensity, chords that struck like lightning, reverberating through the room. The audience could feel the contrast, the ebb and flow of emotion. Each person experienced it differently, yet all were united in the shared experience of something extraordinary. A quiet hush had settled over the room. The previous chatter and distraction were gone, replaced by full attention. People leaned in, listening, feeling, living each moment with her. The music demanded focus, and the audience willingly gave it. There was no pressure, no expectation, only presence. It's the kind that only comes when something rare and genuine is happening. The melody began to take on a storytelling quality. It hinted at struggles, at triumphs, at quiet victories, and unseen battles. Each note carried a fragment of life, small truths that resonated deeply. The audience felt the authenticity, the honesty. They could sense that this was not just performance, it was sharing vulnerability and courage through music. And without realizing it, they were emotionally invested. Waiting for what would come next, the young boy imagined himself as part of the story, a tiny hero in the unfolding scenes of the music. He smiled quietly, feeling the thrill of discovery. The elderly man remembered the choices he had made, both the triumphs and the regrets, feeling a sense of peace. The young woman in the front felt inspired, motivated to embrace her own creativity and passions. The pianist, unaware of the specific impact on each person, simply continued to pour her heart into the piano. Letting the music speak for her, the tempo shifted slightly, just enough to add tension without breaking the flow. The audience responded instinctively, leaning forward, holding their breath in anticipation. The melody was guiding them, leading them through emotions they may not have expected to feel. There were moments of suspense, small surprises, and gentle resolutions, all woven seamlessly together. The audience was now fully engaged, caught in the current of the performance. The pianist's fingers danced across the keys, the music becoming more expressive, more daring. She was exploring the depths of the melody, finding nuances and subtleties that only came with experience and intuition. The audience could sense the skill, but more importantly, they could sense the passion. It was not about showing off talent. It was about creating something meaningful, something that resonated with anyone willing to listen. A few people exchanged glances, realizing that this performance was not ordinary. They had come expecting a pleasant, simple melody, and instead they were witnessing something extraordinary. There was awe in their eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that they were seeing genuine artistry. A rare and beautiful moment that would linger long after the music stopped. The pianist continued. Unaware of the ripple of admiration spreading through the room, the music began to build. Subtle layers emerging, harmonies intertwining with the main melody. The audience could feel the depth growing, the richness of the sound filling the space. Each note was deliberate, yet free, a perfect balance of control and expression. People were moved, silently or visibly, by the realization that they were experiencing not just a performance, but a journey crafted with care, emotion, and authenticity. The young boy at the back opened his eyes, mesmerized. He felt alive in a way he could not describe. The elderly man's heart felt lighter, touched by the delicate balance of nostalgia and inspiration. The young woman felt a sense of possibility, of dreams yet to be pursued, of courage to follow her own path. And all the while, the pianist played, unaware of the personal impact, driven only by the music and the story it wanted to tell. By now, the simple melody that had begun the performance was transformed. It had grown organically, touching everyone in the room, binding them together in shared experience. The audience no longer doubted. They no longer expected anything ordinary. They were witnesses to the unfolding magic, unaware that it was only the beginning, first glimpse of a journey that would soon become unforgettable. The music had grown beyond expectation. What had started as a simple melody was now alive, rich, and deeply moving. The pianist's hands moved with purpose, each note flowing into the next, creating a current of sound that filled the room. It was not just music anymore. It was an experience, a story told without words, understood by anyone willing to listen. The young boy at the back of the room could barely contain his excitement. He leaned forward, his eyes wide, watching the way her fingers danced across the keys. He felt as though the notes were wrapping around him, holding him in a world of sound and emotion he had never entered before. Every chord seemed to speak directly to him, like the music knew him in a way no one else could. The elderly man, who had once thought this would be a polite, forgettable performance, was now completely captivated. He closed his eyes, letting the music take him away. Memories of long ago surfaced, childhood afternoons spent listening to music, moments of laughter and tears, stories of love and loss. Each note seemed to carry fragments of his life, weaving them together in a tapestry of sound that is both familiar and new. The young woman in the front row sat in stunned silence. She had never heard anything quite like this. The simplicity of the opening had lulled her into calm, but now she was overwhelmed by the depth and intensity of the music. The pianist's fingers moved with precision and grace, yet there was a raw honesty to the way she played. It was as if every emotion she had ever felt had been poured into the keys, and the room was the vessel that carried it. The melody began to shift, subtle at first, then more boldly. There were moments of soaring highs where the notes leaped and danced, lifting the listeners as though they were weightless. Then came deep, resonant lows, each chord vibrating through the floor and into the chest, grounding everyone in the raw power of sound. The music became a conversation, a dialogue between the pianist and every person in the room. A story that had no need for words. The young boy felt his heart race, his small hands clenching in excitement. The notes seemed to tell him of adventure, courage, and discovery. He imagined himself as part of the story, running through sunlit fields, climbing mountains, and exploring worlds he had never known. The music carried him, lifted him, and made him feel brave and alive. The elderly man felt tears sliding down his cheeks. He could not explain why he was crying, but it felt good to let go, to be moved by something so pure. Each note reminded him of people he had loved, moments he had cherished, and times he had feared would be lost to memory. The music was giving them life again, holding them up in the present, letting him remember and feel with clarity he had not experienced in years. The young woman in the front felt an ache in her chest, a mixture of sadness and hope. She thought of dreams she had set aside, of chances she had not taken. But the music also lifted her, giving her courage to believe in what might still be possible. She could feel the energy of the pianist, the honesty in her performance, and it inspired a quiet determination. She wanted to live more fully, to pay attention to the beauty in small moments, to embrace her passions. The pianist's eyes were half closed, her face calm but concentrated. She was not performing to impress. She was performing to release, to communicate, to give life to the feelings inside her. Every pause was deliberate, every rise and fall of the melody carefully chosen. The audience felt the intention behind each note. It was not about speed or technical skill or flashiness. It was about connection, about truth, about the shared humanity between the performer and the listeners. The room seemed to breathe with the music. People leaned in, unconsciously swaying, nodding, or closing their eyes. Even those who had arrived distracted or skeptical were now fully engaged. The energy was palpable, subtle but undeniable. The simple expectation of background music had been replaced by something powerful, almost sacred. Every person present felt it differently. Yet they all understood that they were experiencing something rare and beautiful. The melody took on a new layer, more complex, more intricate. Harmonies intertwined, moving in ways that were unexpected but natural. It was like watching a story unfold in real time, each note a word, each chord a sentence, each phrase a chapter. The pianist's hands moved with confidence. Her expression revealed nothing of strain, only focus and calm determination. She was in control, yet freely giving herself to the music. The young boy was now completely lost in the sound. He imagined a world created by the music, filled with color, light, and wonder. The melody lifted him into places his imagination had never reached before. He felt brave, happy, and at peace all at once. The music spoke directly to his heart, teaching him something he could not put into words. It was joy, it was comfort, it was magic. The elderly man felt as if time had stopped. He could hear the room around him, the slight movements, the breathing of the audience, but none of it mattered. All that existed was the music, each note carrying meaning and memory. He thought about the choices he had made, the paths he had taken, the love he had given and received. The music honored those moments, made them tangible again, and gave him a sense of gratitude he had not realized he'd still carried. The young woman was moved to tears. She had never experienced a performance that felt so intimate, so personal, so alive. The music spoke of things she could not name, emotions she had hidden, and hopes she had almost forgotten. She realized that true art is not about perfection, but about honesty and courage. The pianist's playing was honest, vulnerable, and strong all at once. It invited the audience to feel, to reflect, to connect. The pianist began to let the melody flow more freely, allowing the music to lead her rather than the other way around. Each note was an expression of emotion, each phrase a reflection of thought. The room felt suspended in time, held by the gentle but powerful force of her playing. Every listener felt it in their own way, yet all were united by the undeniable presence of something extraordinary unfolding before them. The melody grew more intense, building momentum. The highs soared and the lows resonated deeply, creating a full spectrum of emotion. The audience felt their hearts respond, their breaths syncing with the rhythm. There was anticipation, there was release, there was a sense of wonder. It was as if the music itself had become alive, moving through the room. Touching each person in a way they could feel but not fully explain, the young boy's imagination ran wild. He saw adventures, friends, journeys across mountains and seas. He felt courage, excitement, and happiness. The music encouraged him to dream, to believe, to feel. The elderly man felt reflection, nostalgia, and gratitude. He remembered life's fleeting moments and felt their importance. The young woman felt inspiration, hope, and determination. She realized that the music was more than sound. It was experience, emotion, and life itself. The pianist's fingers moved faster now, yet every movement remained deliberate. She explored the melody, adding subtle flourishes and intricate passages. It was not about showing off, but about fully expressing the emotion she felt. Each note carried weight, purpose, and beauty. The audience could sense the depth of her understanding, the years of practice and dedication behind every movement, yet it was her heart, not technique, that shone brightest. The room was completely silent, every listener enraptured. There were no distractions, no murmurs, no shifts in attention. The music had captured them entirely. Every person was connected by the shared experience, by the wonder of something beautiful and genuine. They were witnessing something rare, something magical, something that would linger in memory long after the last note had faded. The melody continued, growing more expressive, more emotional. The pianist allowed herself small improvisations, letting her feelings guide the flow. Each variation added depth, richness, and nuance. The audience could feel the honesty in every chord, the vulnerability in every pause, the strength in every crescendo. It was as if the music was telling a story not with words, but with life itself. The young boy clutched the edge of his seat, completely absorbed. He felt alive, inspired, and connected to something larger than himself. The elderly man closed his eyes, savoring each moment, feeling memories come alive and mix with present emotions. The young woman wiped her tears, smiling through them, feeling moved in a way she had not expected. And all the while the pianist continued, unaware of the specific impact, yet fully engaged in the shared human experience that her music had created. By now, the audience knew they were witnessing more than a performance. They were experiencing the power of music as a force that could touch hearts, waken memories, inspire hope, and connect strangers in silent understanding. The simple melody that had begun the performance had transformed into pure piano magic, a testament to the skill, heart, and honesty of the performer. The music had reached a point where words could not describe its power. The room was silent, yet heavy with emotion. Every listener caught in a shared experience that seemed larger than life. The pianist's hands moved across the keys effortlessly, yet with great care, each note carrying the weight of something personal, something universal, something that connected the audience to her and to each other. The simple melody that had begun quietly now resonated through every corner of the room, live and transformative. The young boy at the back leaned forward, completely absorbed. He had stopped imagining separate worlds now. He was living in this one, filled with music. Every chord seemed to touch his heart, and he felt as though the melody was speaking directly to him. There was a sense of wonder and awe, but also calmness and understanding. It was strange how a few strings of notes could make him feel so many things at once, from joy to hope to comfort. He realized that music could tell stories without words, teach lessons without speaking, and connect people without needing explanation. The elderly man, whose tears had earlier flowed quietly down his face, now sat in deep reflection. His eyes were closed, and he was lost in the memory and emotion the music evoked. He thought about the paths he had walked, the people he had loved, the dreams he had chased, and the moments he had let pass. Each note brought a fragment of his past alive, but in a new light, giving him perspective and peace. He understood something he had not before, that the beauty of life was in its fleeting moments, and the music had reminded him of their importance. The young woman in the front row wiped her tears and took a slow, steady breath. She had been overwhelmed by the honesty and depth of the performance. It was unlike anything she had expected, yet now it felt natural, like a truth she had been waiting for. The music had stirred emotions she had hidden, dreams she had forgotten, and hopes she had been too afraid to embrace. She realized that true artistry was not about technical skill alone. It was about opening oneself, being vulnerable, and allowing others to feel that truth. As the pianist continued, she allowed the melody to breathe, giving time for each note to linger in the air. The audience felt it, and many closed their eyes, listening deeply, allowing the music to reach inside them. Every pause, every subtle shift, every gentle touch of a key was intentional, and people sensed it. They did not just hear the music, they experienced it. It spoke to them of human emotion, of connection, of the shared experiences that made life meaningful. A man near the back, who had been skeptical when he first arrived, now sat leaning forward, his expression one of awe. He had expected something simple, something background, and instead he had been caught in a flood of emotion and beauty. The music had made him pause, reflect, and feel. He realized that he had underestimated the power of simplicity, the impact of honesty, and the beauty of genuine expression. It was a lesson he would carry long after the performance ended. The young boy's small hands rested in his lap. But he was not idle. His heart raced, and he felt alive in a way he had never felt before. The music had awakened something inside him, a curiosity, a sense of wonder, a love for something pure. He wanted to explore, to create, to feel more deeply. The pianist did not know the effect she had on him. Yet through her playing, she had sparked a change. A spark that might grow into something much larger in the years to come. The elderly man opened his eyes slowly, and the room looked different now. The music had shifted his perception, heightened his awareness of beauty, and reminded him of the value of emotion. He noticed small details he had ignored before: the way sunlight filtered through a window, the gentle sway of leaves outside, the subtle expressions on the faces of others. The music had opened his senses, making the ordinary feel extraordinary. The young woman in the front row was no longer thinking about herself alone. She began to notice the reactions of others, the subtle gestures, the quiet expressions of awe, the tears or smiles shared in silent communion. She understood that the pianist had not just played for her, but for everyone present. The music was a gift, and it had been given freely and honestly. She felt gratitude not just for the performance, but for the reminder that connection, empathy, and shared experience could be found in unexpected places. The pianist's hands moved more fluidly now, almost dancing across the keys. There was a lightness to some notes, a heaviness to others, and each was perfectly balanced. The audience felt the rise and fall of emotion, the ebb and flow of energy, the story that was being told without words. Some leaned in closer, some closed their eyes, some simply breathed in the moment. Everyone was aware of the presence of something extraordinary, though they could not define it. They only knew it touched them deeply. The room's energy shifted subtly at first, then more noticeably. People who had been distracted or doubtful were now fully attentive. They felt the music reaching them, connecting them not just to the pianist, but to themselves and to each other. There was a quiet unity, a shared understanding of what they were witnessing. It was not about competition, comparison, or judgment. It was about being present, feeling, and recognizing the extraordinary in the simple act of someone playing from the heart. The young boy imagined himself inside the music, a part of its flow and movement. He felt courage, hope, and joy. The elderly man felt reflection, nostalgia, and peace. The young woman felt inspiration, empathy, and a sense of possibility. Each listener felt differently, yet all shared a connection that was silent, profound, and unmistakable. The music had achieved something rare. It had united people in an experience that transcended words. The pianist did not stop to look at the audience. She was fully immersed in the music, listening as much as she played. Her emotions guided her hands, and the notes responded naturally. There was no performance for show, no intention to impress. Every movement, every chord, every pause was authentic. The audience could feel it, and it moved them. They understood that the magic of this moment came not from complexity or speed, but from honesty, vulnerability, and heart. As the music continued, small details became more noticeable. The gentle rise of a chord here, the subtle fall there, the way a pause hung in the air just long enough to make the next note meaningful. People could feel the intention behind each gesture, and it made them more attentive, more aware, more alive. They realized that art, when truly authentic, did not need explanation. It spoke directly to the soul. The young boy now sat completely still, lost in the sound, feeling each note as though it were part of him. He understood, in a small but real way, that music could communicate what words often could not. It could inspire courage, bring comfort, awaken hope, and unite people across ages and experiences. He felt grateful, even if he could not explain why. For being part of this shared moment, the elderly man felt his heart swell with emotion. The music had reminded him of the power of life's fleeting moments and of the beauty in paying attention. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. A recognition that even ordinary days could contain extraordinary experiences if one was open to them. He realized that the pianist's playing had given him something more valuable than entertainment. It had given him reflection, understanding, and connection. The young woman's tears had slowed, but her emotions remained strong. She understood now that she had witnessed something rare, a performance that was more than just music. It was storytelling, human connection, and shared vulnerability, all in one. She felt a quiet gratitude for being present, for having the chance to feel, to reflect, and to be reminded of the power of honest expression. The pianist's hands continued to move effortlessly, the music flowing and changing, guiding the room in emotion and thought. Every chord, every note, every pause was deliberate yet natural. The audience could feel the evolution of the melody, the depth of its meaning, and the sincerity of its expression. It was impossible to ignore the truth in the performance. It was impossible not to be affected. The room was silent yet alive. Every listener was immersed in the music, experiencing it in their own way, yet sharing a collective understanding. The power of the moment was subtle but undeniable. The pianist had taken something ordinary, a simple piano melody, and transformed it into an extraordinary experience. The audience felt it deeply, some visibly, some quietly within themselves. But all knew they had been touched by something real and meaningful. By now, the performance had become more than music. It was reflection, emotion, connection, and magic. The audience understood that they had witnessed a rare moment of truth and beauty, one that would remain in their hearts long after the last note faded. The pianist had not only played, she had shared, given, and created a moment that united strangers through the simple, powerful language of the human heart and the piano. The final notes began to fade, lingering in the air like a soft whisper. The pianist's hands slowed, resting gently on the keys. Yet the sound seemed to hold on for a moment longer, refusing to leave the room. The audience sat quietly, as if afraid to break the spell that had been created. Every person present felt the impact of what they had just witnessed, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and something deeper that they could not yet name. The young boy at the back exhaled slowly, his small chest rising and falling as if he had been holding his breath for the entire performance. He had been transported through a world of imagination, courage, and wonder, and now he felt a quiet sense of calm. The music had shown him something he could not describe. a feeling of being alive in a new way, a sense that life was bigger, brighter, and more full of possibility than he had imagined. The elderly man blinked slowly, tears still glistening in his eyes. He felt gratitude, not just for the music, but for the reminder that life was precious and fleeting. The piano had spoken to him in a way no words could, connecting him to memories, emotions, and the shared experience of everyone in the room. He realized that beauty could be found in simple, honest moments, and that paying attention, truly paying attention, is a gift in itself. The young woman in the front row smiled softly through her tears. She had been touched in ways she could not fully articulate. The performance had reminded her of her own dreams, her own passions, and her own humanity. She felt inspired to embrace life more fully, to listen more closely to her own heart, and to notice the small, beautiful moments that often went overlooked. The music had opened a door within her. She knew she would carry its influence long after leaving the room. A hush filled the space, broken only by the quiet shifting of chairs and the soft collective breath of the audience. No one moved to clap or speak. There was a reverence in the room, a recognition that something rare and precious had just occurred. The pianist herself remained seated, calm and composed, not seeking attention or praise. She had shared something deeply personal, and the audience had received it fully, understanding the value of honesty, vulnerability, and connection. The music had created a bridge between the performer and each listener. Each person had experienced it differently, yet all were united by a shared sense of presence and understanding. The young boy had felt courage and wonder. The elderly man had felt reflection and peace. The young woman had felt inspiration and hope. And all of them had felt something intangible, a connection to something larger than themselves. Carried through the piano's voice, the pianist slowly rose from the bench, her movements graceful and deliberate. She did not look for applause, yet her gaze swept across the room, acknowledging the shared moment. People sat in silence, some still with closed eyes, some looking around at each other, and realizing that they had all been touched in ways that words could not capture. The music had created a shared memory, one that would linger in their minds and hearts for years to come. As she stepped away from the piano, the room seemed to exhale collectively. Conversations began slowly, almost hesitantly, as if people were testing whether the magic had truly ended. Yet everyone knew it had not. The performance had planted something in each person, a seed of emotion, awareness, and connection that would grow quietly in the background of their lives. They had witnessed not just skill, but heart. The difference between the two was profound. The young boy stayed seated a moment longer, imagining the music still flowing around him. He felt a sense of possibility, a belief that he could create and explore, that he could feel and dream. The elderly man reflected on the choices he had made and the paths he had walked, finding peace and appreciation in the process. The young woman considered her own life, her own dreams, and felt a renewed sense of courage. The music had given them all something more than Melodia had given them: insight, emotion, and inspiration. People began to rise from their seats slowly, some speaking in hushed tones, sharing their feelings with those around them. There was a quiet energy in the room, a hum of connection and understanding. The performance had not ended with the last note. It had left an imprint, a gentle reminder that extraordinary experiences could emerge from ordinary moments when honesty, talent, and heart converged. The pianist moved toward the door, gathering her belongings with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout. No one rushed to follow, no one demanded attention or recognition. They simply observed, allowing the moment to settle, knowing that what had happened was rare and real. The music had not been about performance. It had been about sharing, connecting, and revealing the human spirit through sound. A few minutes passed in silence, and then the audience slowly began to move. They shared glances, small smiles, and quiet words of admiration. There was an unspoken agreement among them that they had witnessed something extraordinary, and that its impact would remain with them long after the room had emptied. The music had touched their hearts, stirred their memories, and inspired their thoughts. It had been more than a performance, it had been an experience, a lesson, and a gift.